I don't see her. I don't see her. Everyone?
Yes.
Hey, well, welcome Linda, Erin, and Megan. Thank you so much for joining us for today's session. The work session is titled Equity Framework Prototyping Workshop, and Manoj is going to be leading us through this. So I will, I think, yeah, you can use the button.
Is it what? Here's what?
Just so I can't see the people.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Well, no, because
Do it on
this,
TV.
this computer is not.
I'll give him mine. Okay. Well, sorry, we're still ironing out a few tech issues. And just to begin with, we'll do the roll call just so that we have that formally in place. Manoj,
Here.
Linda,
I'm here.
thank you. Erin,
Hello, I'm here.
hello, Erin, thank you.
Did you want to turn on your camera so both of you are in it or not?
Jasmine. She wasn't gonna make it. Joanne may join us at some point. Cameron will not be available and Carolyn is not available either. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Manoj to start talking us through today's workshop.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for making space in the middle of the week, in the middle of the day. Appreciate that. I know that can be difficult to do. So just appreciate time spent on this. The purpose of today is really just sort of to understand various perspectives on what an equity framework might look like. So I've prepared kind of just a handful of questions, and I'm actually glad that this is a small group because it'll be easier to chat about and just kind of go through things together. So I'll have questions that are very pointed and targeted towards like what values do need to be communicated in an equity framework? What are some specific examples that you would like to see covered? So things like that. We'll get into all of that in a moment, but just in terms of process, I want to kind of make sure everyone's clear in terms of today and then moving forward. And if anyone has a difficult take, I can sort of walk us through that. I'd love feedback as well, but I'd love to sort of do that fact finding today. And then I will take that feedback and I will literally just put pen to paper to begin to articulate some ideas and concepts based on the feedback from everyone today. I'll distribute that to this subcommittee for feedback and iteration. That's sort of a step 2. And then step 3 would be to take that feedback and then distribute the evolving document. I'll call it a 1.0 equity framework to the rest of HREC for feedback. And sort of will evolve from there. We'll take that feedback, create a 2.0 version, show that to some city council folks, potentially for Megan, specifically to get feedback, and then await for the DEI director as well to get there. We don't get too far along before a new director is in place. So that's my thought on process. I will pause there. Questions, comments, concerns in terms of process. Feedback today, initial sketches put together for feedback, then sort of a 1.0 developed, then a 2.0 for the rest of HREC. Feel good? for
I'll
everyone?
just say it makes sense. Makes sense. Just, cut it into pieces.
Awesome. And that's not set in stone. So if anyone has an inspiration later in terms of process or how to more effectively do this, definitely open to that. But before we get into like all the stuff for today, I haven't seen you all. We didn't have a meeting last month. I would love to just do a check-in. We have ample time in terms of our schedule. We won't take up 2 hours. I guarantee. Like I'll give you time back. Let's just do a check-in. How's everyone doing? Just kind of sharing a little bit about your week and highs and lows, kind of whatever. I would just love to hear how life is going for folks before we dig in. Yeah. Linda, would you mind starting us?
I wouldn't, I'll go ahead because quite a story, actually. A lot has happened with me over the last 2 months. This transition from, living free outside to four walls and basically what amounts to a project has been really challenging. And, I thought I had learned quite a bit being homeless. Now I'm learning a whole nother level, because I see, holes in the process where people are falling through, missing, what's missing is the follow through the support after housing. So in this building in particular, there's problems developing just as a result of lack of design and lack of attention to that kind of detail. For example, there's no place for the kids to play. Yeah, and lots of places for dogs, which has resulted in lots of trouble with that waste. A lot of people are just letting their pets fertilize the forest. Doesn't work so well in a neighborhood. And behavioral issues. So I have one particular story that I'm really concerned about and sort of in an ethical quandary about, actually. Like maintaining all anonymity, there's a tenant here who, long story short, turns out she can't read.
Wow.
Like can't identify in a written word, and went ahead and signed 30 pages of a lease because they just say this is what it says, sign here.
Oh my goodness.
Right, they don't ever really require people to actually read it and understand it before it's signed. And I find that I spent the first quarter of my life 25 years or something avoiding math. And then I ran into a professor at the University of Minnesota that told me that you have to understand how intelligent you have to be in order to avoid math for the first 25 years of your life. Well, I can imagine on a personal level how it's not that darn hard to avoid reading in this world. It is tough, right? A lot tougher than avoiding math, right? But she's managed to do it. And the only reason I found out is because she was very, very upset that she thought she got kicked out because there was a notice on her door. And one of my other neighbors who I'm kind of buddies with found her very upset and took a look at the notice and discovered that it wasn't that at all, but something very, very different. So it just really hit me in my face that the issues for equity and inclusion and diversity don't end after that person is put in a physical structure. They don't end. And I was sitting outside yesterday looking at this place. I'm from Minneapolis. And I've seen incredibly exciting projects like Cedar Square West, for example, which was supposed to be the new town in town concept, right? Today it's a slum. Well, not slum, but pretty darn close. So it just doesn't end. That's what I wanted to say. So yeah, and I lost my Ms. Marilyn, my homeless pandemic kitty, and that was really hard. So yeah, I've been kind of a little bit absent, and I'm sort of I feel really bad about that, but turning it around, getting a different job. I'm going to get another rescue cat. I'm going to rescue somebody from their cage this weekend. And so I'll have a little company and comfort. So I'm ready to launch, and I just really want to apologize that I've been a tad absent, but wow, there's a lot going on for me. So did that kind of, I hope what I'm saying applies to what we're doing to you. It's because I've tried to make it, so. Can you hear me? Oh, I think you're muted. You're muted, I think.
Oh. Can you hear us? Hello?
Now I can, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. And I love how you care about your immediate community. That's really cool. And not just going about your business. So I appreciate that. That's good inspiration for me. Is there anything that HREC can do to come alongside you during a difficult season?
I had an ethical problem.
Okay.
Problem is that she is extremely vulnerable because like she woke up to one day like completely surprised that they're working on the bottom floor, the first floors here, because they approved this really quick and there's still work to do. She's in a vulnerable situation because she can't read the notices and doesn't know what's going on. So I can't talk to her directly because I found this information out about this from my neighbors, ratting, telling on people about their situations. That's something in the homeless community you don't do.
Gotcha.
I will lose all credibility.
Mm-hmm.
And should, so I mean, but at the same time, I can't stand by. So I was thinking maybe I should go talk to our building manager, just tell her, must remain anonymous, but you need to know that this tenant can't read. So she needs support.
Yeah.
Is that an ethical way to go about that?
I'm hesitant to give you advice because I don't know the situation well enough, and I'm
well, that's my quandary now.
not an expert.
Wow.
But on a human level, I think trying to help makes a lot of sense. And coming alongside her in ways that are thoughtful, yet not making her feel shame or guilt or embarrassment and anything like that. So I think you've got something. I think you've got ideas that are on the right track.
I have to do something. I'm going to do something. I'll figure it out ethically and maybe talk to a couple of people outside the situation. But as a commissioner and as someone who is spending time thinking and reading and studying about the equity and diversity and inclusion, I mean, it's what's hidden that where people fall through the cracks. Yeah. So not bringing that to light, I feel like I'm working counter to my HREC goals. Just ignoring it.
Linda, this is Cassandra. I really appreciate you sharing that with us and also appreciate the idea that it is an ethical quandary about what to do particularly. But just from an accessibility perspective, you might talk to management and say there are multiple ways that people will receive information. And it may be something that, during their leasing process or when they're talking in person, like, how would you like to receive notification or messages? It could be phone calls, somebody particularly calling, and not relying on written documents, especially also if there needs to be things that are translated. So there's a multitude of ways that you could approach it with management just from an accessibility perspective without having to overtly respond or, break any kind of confidentiality and anonymity.
Which should be included in our framework as a guideline to create accessibility and therefore inclusion.
100%.
Because ultimately in the process and the way people live their lives, that's a journey, not like 2 points in a line.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll put up now.
Thank you for bringing that up. And again, on a personal level, if there's anything I can do, feel free to text me, call me, email me, whatever to connect. I'm happy to support and help you in anything. But specifically,
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure.
Really,
for sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for getting us off to a good start. I really appreciate that. A vulnerable yet on point. So that was a great beginning. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Aaron, I'm going to pick on you next. Are you there and available to chat?
I am here. I'm not sure. It looks like my video isn't working, but can you hear me okay at least?
Yeah, we can hear you and see you just fine.
Okay. Okay, great. I can't see that my video is working, but as long as it's on. Thanks for starting with this. And yeah, thank you, Linda, for being so honest about what's going on with you and your community and where you're at. And I'd like to just second what Manoj said about if there's anything I can do, please feel free to reach out to me. But where I am at, it is a very weird time to be a trans person in the United States. Obviously, there's some really horrible legislation being passed, and it's thankfully not in Oregon, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't, impact me and people that I know, whether directly or just indirectly. I feel like I've been doing a lot of just switching between avoiding that information so I can get on with my life, and kind of sitting with it and feeling really angry and frustrated and scared. And I think that's from what I've talked to with other people where a lot of people are at right now around that kind of stuff. Of course, there's also not trans people are not the only people being impacted by this kind of thing, but it does seem like it's really ramping up of late towards the trans community. So, I mean, it's a strange time. Personally, I'm having a really great spring and enjoying the beautiful weather and being able to get outdoors and all of these wonderful things. And then you open your phone and you see the next horrible thing coming out of Florida or out of another state that's trying to ban being able to talk to trans youth or being able to get medical care or whatever it is. So it's a real disconnect. It's really strange to sit with, but yeah, just that kind of confusion and that kind of complex feelings is where I am currently at right now.
Please don't forget that you have allies, okay?
I appreciate it. Thank you, Linda.
Starbucks. You have allies out here. You are not freaking alone. We were at the window at Starbucks, and one of my partners got mocked, and gender mocked, obviously, painfully, and it's just remember you have allies, okay? You have allies out here. You call me too. If you ever want to rant and rave. Yeah, I'll rant and rave with you.
I really appreciate that. And I was really heartened to go to the Trans Day of Visibility event that was organized kind of last minute by, I think, a few young people and students in the community. And I was really impressed with how many people showed up to that. And I think the organizers were as well. And that was really, really lovely to see. So definitely know there's some great people in Bend and in the area. And I appreciate that, Linda. That's really kind. But yeah, it's a complicated time.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Erin. I appreciate how you recognize and appreciate the duality of your personal life, having some really highs and then some really negative things coming sort of hand in hand. So it's not all up and it's not all down. It might be somewhere in between overall, but it seems like you're appreciating the good stuff too. So yeah, that was really good. For me, I have been traveling a lot, and my wife has been as well. So I think we're on week 3 out of 6 where we literally will not see each other for both of our travels. So that's interesting. And there's a lot of with that coordination and handoffs with our kids. So they're getting tossed around a little bit, but those issues pale in comparison to what else is going on. Overall, things are really good. I've been traveling to cool places with really good clients, so that's been good. But yeah, I think what you both have said just undermines the importance of the work that we are doing, and also that HREC is a safe place. And that's big for me, that we can share and be vulnerable with one another and hold one another So I just appreciate the bravery from both of you so far. So yeah. With that, can we get started on some business? That's okay. And I don't want to exclude others, but I want to be mindful of time. Because I know y'all got more important things to do than hang out with me. So I will lead with a handful of questions, but I don't have like a huge like agenda for today. So if you want to take it in a different direction, have different thoughts, like please share, don't be bashful. My first question for you both is thinking about an equity framework. What would be, and I'm going to use a couple of fancier terms, but we can break that down. What principles, values, should be at the forefront of an equity framework? And don't worry about your language of like making sure you've got like pretty words or whatever. But I'd love to know, like, what are some core pillars that an equity framework should have included? Just as an example, one could be accountability, and there's certain key data points that should be tracked and monitored to create that accountability, and other systems as well. So I just wanted to give an example of what I was thinking of in case that is unclear. It doesn't have to be accountability, like we can have a bunch of others, but from a beginning standpoint, what are some pillars, some values, some beliefs that you think should be core to an equity framework?
I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is just the idea that like, no matter how developed an equity framework is, and how proficient at it, somebody or a department gets, that it should always be evolving. And so I think accountability is a piece of that, but also like acknowledging that there's always going to be iteration and growth is important.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other big thing that jumps to mind is like engagement with affected folks and community members, so that it's not just now we have a checklist, we go through the checklist, that's the end of the day. Like, I think obviously reaching out and searching for blind spots is really important.
Those are really good. Thanks, Erin. And for now, I'd like to just list a lot of those ideas, like evolving engagement with the community. I'd like to list as many ideas as we can, and then we can go deeper on a handful where there's energy. But for now, like the more the merrier. So I'd love to keep building on other values, beliefs, pillars that a framework should stand for.
So I guess, up at the top of that list, of course, right, it has to be inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
But enveloped, can I say that word? Enveloped by, how do I want to say this? I don't know. Inclusion, it's just like one word and it's so huge, right? So I think it has to be inclusion has to be something that is built from the bottom up. It can't be something that's just like, so to make it real world, I mean, like to ground it into something, there has to be like opportunities for the community or parts of it to build groups or mechanisms or little companies where they can not only contribute to the community, but also to the greater one, right? So for example, I heard about this dude, mechanic, right? And he made this, I think he called it auto safe, look it up, I think. And basically he just, he goes around, he went around to different auto mechanic places and he said, will you donate your time to fix automobiles for the homeless? Or I know some amazing mechanics out in China that can't get a job, but are magician mechanics,
Mm.
right? So, and who would thrive under a small business situation. Right?
Yeah.
So maybe we borrow some sort of model like WeWork, although less schemish. All right, we just borrow the little ideas from it, right? And we somehow managed to finagle a building, and we can put 3 or 4 different businesses in that building.
Mhm.
So those kinds of I want to make sure that inclusion means we provide opportunities for actual community members to not only grow themselves, but grow their community and the larger one as well, by solving problems, by providing solutions. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I think that for me, the operative word in all of that stuff is in inclusive opportunities.
Yeah.
Right? Inclusive opportunities. So let's find a way to set aside a fund where we can, make opportunities for, there's a lot of people out there with a lot of talent
Mhm.
that is just getting not utilized. So finding ways to utilize that and dig that up with benefit to the individual, benefit to the community, and benefit to Bend.
Mm.
Everybody gets a little benefit, everybody pays a little, everybody gets paid a little, kind of thing.
That
That's
was so good.
kind of how I ground out inclusion in my mind, rather than just like describing we have to do this. I mean, like, provide opportunities for other people to do it.
Mhm. Yeah, that was so good, Linda. I mean, I wrote down a couple keywords based on what you're saying, and one is like contribution, where everyone is contributing to the greater good. The second was access, for your example of like, there's some great mechanics, but they don't have opportunity. How can we create systems for them to have access to that opportunity that they deserve? And then the third one is like what you said at the end, just like mutual benefit, where everyone is benefiting from the system as opposed to select groups. So that was really good. Thank you. Let's build from there. I'd love to think about this from an audience perspective. So when we develop an equity framework, one of the key audiences in my mind is like city staff and employees. Not to put you guys on the spot here, but city staff and employees will need a framework, a lens for which they do their day-to-day jobs, whether it's big, huge initiatives or smaller day-to-day operations, like the language you use in emails and meetings, things like that. Not that that's small, I still think that's important, but in terms of like impact on others. Thinking about that audience, what are some big pillars, values, ideas that should be represented in the framework? Feel free to contribute. It's for everyone, not just HRAC. That includes you too, Ian.
Thank you.
No pressure though.
I can start out with one word, I guess. Hiring and retention.
Okay, tell me about that.
We talk a lot about isms, right? Everything is an ism, and we're all familiar with the ageism thing, right? But ageism is something that, it's darn near impossible to talk about, right? Because if you're under 22 or around under that, I don't know how to put this. Ageism isn't something you really see and understand until you actually experience it. A lot like racism, but only in that aspect, of course. But I don't know where I'm going with this. It's just, there's a whole bunch of things we can do to address those things. within the hiring process and the advertising process, and that before we even get to, the laws around it.
Mhm.
So, I think for me, it's about creating of a positive, like, opportunity environment,
Mhm.
for lack of three better words to put together. You know,
Yeah, for sure. To build on your idea, I see
Please.
a big part of this being like an education piece of it. Like you said, you don't know what it's like to be discriminated against based on age or other factors unless you're like in it, kind of thing. Well, certainly we can't replicate what it feels like, but we can educate as best as possible. So to me, one of the ideas I have is like education, like kind of a key thing, particularly around the hiring, retention, the employees that are on staff, all of that. When the city does all of its functions, how can we have people who are at least educated on what it might feel like to
Yeah.
face a certain ism?
Yeah. And also alongside that, one thing I learned at Starbucks, even, though it's complicated conversation, but I will tell you that their model for creating and maintaining and developing relationships between partners and customers is exceptional.
Hmm.
And I wouldn't mind seeing something like that for Bend, in terms of how do you, what are the bullet points of creating a positive culture,
Hmm.
rather than just like living in a set of basic rules. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, a company can choose to, be kind and have a larger mind, and let it, give space for a Muslim worker to pray as they need to do on the schedule they need to do it. It shouldn't be, you either work or you pray. It's ridiculous.
Mhm.
And so providing, being able to create a culture where, people who don't pray don't feel like letting someone else pray is taking something away from me, or I'm working harder than they are. That's ridiculous. We have to get out of that mindset if we ever really want to produce, like, actually have an inclusive environment.
Yeah, that's really good.
It's buried in culture.
In your experience, either at Starbucks or other venues, what are some good culture building aspects that you've observed from a equity perspective?
Seeing every member of your team equally, regardless their status, regardless their title, treating, approaching people as if, assuming that they have good intentions rather than poor ones.
Mhm.
Right? And just those pillars of basic, like, emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
that need to be more part of our mainstream culture and more part of our workspace reality. So, and also a coaching environment.
Mhm.
A coaching environment. So, when you opened up our first meeting together, and you said, one of my pillars of my method of operating is compassionate feedback.
Uh-huh.
Well, that itself is a pillar of inclusion,
Mhm.
right? Because now you're not talking about politics. Now you're talking about how do we all help each other become better.
Yeah.
I guess.
Thank you, Linda. I have lots of good notes from that dialogue, so I appreciate that. Aaron, back to you. From sorry, never mind. Aaron, back to you. From a staff perspective, what are some ideas that the city needs to employ in terms of ideas, culture building, anything that we've talked about?
Sorry, I had to step away for a second for a work thing.
That's
Were we
okay.
talking more about, I know Linda was talking about retention and hiring and team building. Is, I guess, your question more in the context of the equity framework, or like more broadly how to build the team that can?
Around the equity framework,
Mm-hmm.
if the audience is employees of the city,
Mm-hmm.
what are some key ideas they need to be cognizant of? Key pillars of the framework from an employee perspective, and we'll move to citizens in a moment.
Got it. Yeah, I think not to repeat myself, but I do think like acknowledging that no matter how much expertise someone comes in with, there's always more to learn is really important. And being able to do that collaboratively, do like a lot of listening, do a lot of education around, you know, who's in our community, how are they impacted in different ways, how are within those communities people impacted in different ways. Of course, every community is not a monolith. And then I think, I mean, I think the point of the equity framework, right, is to have like a tool for them to work through this. So I guess I think like, I mean, this maybe not be actually what you're asking, but I guess I think like having a lot of open-ended questions is helpful rather than check boxes, like
Yes.
framing things more around like, you know, imagine how this could impact these people, or are there things you're not thinking, you know, like generating ideas rather than checking a box feels like it's going to be a lot more helpful, both as like a mindset and as a structure, I guess.
Love that.
What else? I think that's what I've got for now, but I'll keep turning on it and let you know if I come up with something else.
Cool. Yeah, the checklist versus questions, open-ended questions, is something that's been on my heart as well as I was thinking about this meeting. And I think having the like example open-ended questions for a given pillar of the framework is really important, as opposed to like a stepwise, like linear, like did you do this, did you do that, did you do that kind of thing. But to your point, getting people to think a certain way as opposed to more robotic, mechanical steps to a process kind of thing. So I think we're on the same wavelengths for sure. And I can envision our framework to that end having, you know, a given value, accountability, just kind of as the leading example, and then 2 or 3 kind of like maybe more example questions on, in terms of accountability, have you thought of this? Have you done that? Why are you doing this? Some kind of key mindset questions for people to be thinking about as they sort of become familiar with our framework. So I think that's good. Cassandra, you had a thought.
Thank you. I think that it runs parallel to Manoj, what you've said, and Aaron, what you shared regarding education. I think for staff specifically, like really, greetings, really getting down to the why we're putting a framework or an equity lens in place, and getting really clear on that. Because I think when you get down to the why, then you really get down to like our shared humanity about why we're doing this. And instead of it being some sort of like up in this clouds idea of this lens or this framework that's being made to be applied to the work that you do, you know why you do it. You do it for your colleagues because you want to be in this kind of, you know, better environment for everyone. And I think that comes from education and determining and making decisions about, you know, how and why we're applying this and the rationale behind it. So I think the education piece that goes in tandem with the actual implementation of the framework is going to be really important. And I hesitate to say because it's buy-in, but it is similar in the idea of people understand exactly why that template is there and why they want to use it, because it's ultimately going to make our city better and it's going to make our relationships with each other stronger.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you, Cassandra. Thoughts and builds to what she said. Cool.
I want to just, make sure that so being coming from Minneapolis, the metro area is like at almost every layer, they are huge on assessments, any kind of assessments. Minneapolis loves assessments. But they can be very powerful impact assessments, equity impact assessments, as was described in the paperwork. But some of those assessments are made, like, I want to make sure that who is making those assessments, right? If we're gonna talk about impact assessments, then an important piece of that, I think, is asking those who are actually impacted or not. Instead of, often often we just basically, we go to the data and analyze the data. And then, talk to a few, but sometimes that analyzing the data isn't quite enough.
Yeah.
Right? There's that missing piece between asking a person a question and then turning it into a number and getting it out the door as a result. There's lots of fuzziness in that. So making sure, well, not fuzziness, but I have a lot of respect for data analysis and data analysis, but and the people who do it. But just I want to make sure that we're actually, if we're going to, as we think about adding assessments and ways to track, how do we make sure that this is doing what it needs to do? That we actually ask, that there's a process for actually asking the question, much like Aaron was talking about in terms of making sure that we assess and review. That has to be a process, not just an endpoint quarterly. Make sense?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up assessment. Totally makes sense. What are some key areas of assessment that you think need to be included?
Man, categorize them at this point. I don't know. Help me out, Aaron.
Yeah, not to stump anybody, but I think that's kind of something we're going to have to wrestle with.
No, but it's going to be already written into it as we go forward, what we're going to assess on. So, all three words, equity, diversity, and inclusion, have, so many different layers in them that go into that bucket, right? So as we lay those things out, then we'll get a better idea of what points. There's three things. There's time assessments, right? And there's category assessments, right? And then there's I suppose like kinds of assessments like what was that about? That like physical assessments. Like, is that property really functioning the way it, like this? One of my assessments at this place would be like, man, you forgot about to give the place a freaking the kids a place to play. So kids are gonna play. So now the playground is the entire ring around the building, and also the breezeways through it, especially on the first floor. So I feel like doing what I do at Starbucks when you turn a corner into the back room, you get back corner, so you don't run into somebody through the swing door to the back room. Yeah. So it's, if we think about it, those three large buckets, and then break up them into little buckets, the three: physical, what did I say, cultural,
category, which if you could clarify,
categories, which cultural would be one of them.
Okay, yeah, if you could clarify what you mean by category, that would be helpful. So
So
culture,
categories would be like, what are we, like, race? All of the unheard, are we including the homeless? Are we including the disabled? Are we including, like, you kind of, so categories, well, help me out, you guys. Like,
like communities, is that what you're indicating? People groups?
I guess,
Okay,
and, but also within that. And then, like, I don't know, I'm gonna have to think further on this, but there's a lot of
Okay.
ways to cup that pie. But I will say this, that the more ways you cut the pie, the more information you have about everybody in it, in the plate.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I bet you we'll find, like, how to do that, like, as we go through this. If we, like, every time we're doing this, we assess our own selves and say, okay, well, how are we going to measure that?
Mhm.
Basically, does that make sense?
Yeah. I definitely think, yeah, there's more thinking we need to put into the assessment angle. But I like those three areas that you described now, and I think we can build on it with some further thought. Any other thoughts, comments, questions on assessment before we move forward? Okay. I will pause. How is this feeling to everyone? I want to do sort of a temperature check. My next thought was to talk about an equity framework from a citizen perspective, if there aren't any like city staff employee kind of perspective. But I want to see how everyone's feeling, and if there's a different sort of topic we should go to next, if there's a different way to approach the rest of our time together. Just want to do a quick check-in.
Now, personally, I think that this part of this entire kind of, project is actually the hardest. It's actually the hardest because, in my view, because there's especially, well, I'm not going to say especially in Benedict, because every community is unique, right? But so I'll just talk about Bend without like trying to compare it, right? But some of these ideas, like for example, NIMBYism, is so entrenched here, right? That it's in the physicality, it's in the social networks, it's entrenched, and it's been since forever. So that it's not going to work just to tell the greater public, we're doing this because we want to include and be diverse and blah blah blah. It's like catchwords and all that is probably not going to be all that effective, right? So this, I think, is where it's going to take some real investment. Like we have to start coming up with a possibility of being able to use larger and expensive and possibly expensive tools to change public opinion about how these decisions should be made, right? So, role-playing games or planning games like Minneapolis did with the Blueprint 2030, where we went out and we created like this kind of a Monopoly game based on the work of a certain city planner years ago. Really, it's the huge part of this for me is the educational part, and that's what's going to take like a real public investment in that. I wasn't shocked, but I was certainly saddened when my partner at Starbucks had to be shamed and named on the headset public at drive-through through the speaker, right through the little headset we wear. So so public education, yes, but it has to be of a certain unique, and I'm going to even use the word shocking. Not shocking. We have to have some honest conversations with this community. Yeah. Seriously. About how damaging is it, like discrimination like that? How damaging it is to the person being bullied, and what is the damage to the bullier? There's damage to the bullier.
Yeah.
You know, if it's a city, a state, or a person,
Mhm.
you know, so that's not going to be a slow process at all. I mean, that's not gonna be a fast process at all, right?
Yeah.
But you know, so anything in this, I would like to see language in this framework that challenges people to join the conversation and from a solution oriented perspective. And some hard language about excluding language that doesn't help at all.
Mhm.
I mean, enough is enough.
I love that passion.
I'll get upset about it. So
No, we need that.
you're more than welcome to cut me off when
No,
it's not,
that's good.
helping anybody.
No, that's good. I will say that the publication education piece is a bigger thing that is a down the road thing, in my opinion. I completely agree with you, and I love where your head's at, but I'm going to be a linear thinker for a moment, whereas we've got a yes, there needs to be language around exactly what you said, but in terms of like educating the general public, I feel like we have to follow other steps and really put pen to paper first.
Yeah,
And
but we could, not to interrupt you, but because
Yeah.
I don't want to lose a thought, we
Sure.
could put language in the framework that says that like, you know, we need like this, like structural help to start to create that kind of educational program. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, set aside some time or some funds to study how we might go about this, or you know what I'm trying to get at?
I got you.
Leave
Yeah.
some room in the framework and some encouragement and some hard language about, yeah, we have to do this, about how to get there later.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Rather than coming up with specific tactics now, perhaps it's more about posing the question and raising it as a very large action item to create that educational programming for people and how we maybe some initial thoughts on how we might go about that. So I'm on board with that. I think that makes sense. Cool.
Do you have anything you want to share?
Ian?
Just briefly, I think figuring out how to integrate more equity and inclusion in decision-making processes while also recognizing that that doesn't mean everybody is going to get the outcome they want every time is, to me, the real challenge. We hear this a lot in local government. I think people who don't get the outcome they want because the duly elected policymakers make a different decision feel, and I don't think this is unjustified, but they often feel like they're not listened, they haven't been listened to. And so how do you meet that challenge? I think that obligation to make people feel listened to and heard, when you know necessarily that doesn't mean everybody's always going to get what they want after they've been heard. And so that's an ongoing challenge. I think it will present additional facets as we move towards a better equity framework. Now, how do we do that? How do you genuinely listen to somebody? I think there are two sides to this. How do the decision makers genuinely listen and incorporate different perspectives, even if their decision is going to be different? And how do those who are offering the input really feel they're listened to if their suggestion or preferred outcome isn't taken, adopted, achieved? I think that's a challenge now. It's going to be an ongoing challenge as we get better and more sophisticated with equity.
Yeah. To what degree would you say that's a comms thing, where it's like, we went against what you all wanted because?
That's a good question. I mean, I think government, and I think people in this organization take this pretty seriously, engaging with people to try to provide information or explanation as to why certain decisions get made or why certain outcomes happen. But I don't know that it is entirely something that can be, or something that can be solved entirely through better, different, more sophisticated communication. I mean, that's part of it, but I think there's a human nature, not that we're trying to crack to. When we don't get what we want, we tend to think we're not listened to or we weren't heard. And I don't know if we can solve that, but it's something in the back of my mind. How do we get better at that?
Yeah. Yeah, but to that end, I hear you. Like it's sort of like people are gonna feel angry, bad, sad, whatever, when they don't get what they want. But can we at least make the attempt to be better communicators on rationale?
For
How
sure.
effective are we now? And
For
where
sure.
can we improve that? Is
For
it
sure.
frequency? Is it content? Is
Yep.
it channel? What is it that we can improve?
It-
If nothing else from a covering yourself perspective.
And I think we have to, I think we have to try, because if we adopt, expand, implement I'll say better equity framework into how we do things, but people perceive that some of the outcomes are the same, or that the changes that they associate with this either aren't coming or are coming fast enough, or are too incremental, or not what they want. I think there could be a tendency to think, well, this equity framework is only window dressing because the perception is nothing is changing. So that is in the back of my mind constantly as we move through this. I mean, hopefully there will be changes that people see, but again, human nature, not everybody will recognize them, or people pay attention to one thing and not other things. And so how do we make this meaningful, I guess, while also being realistic? And maybe that's the incrementalist in me, and that's not everybody is an incrementalist or needs to be. But I see that as an ongoing thing to be aware of, at least, or try to work on.
Okay, that's good feedback. I'd like to move us to citizens. So think about all that the city does in terms of public safety is one of the core areas. Help me out here, team. Infrastructure. So like how stuff works. What are the other areas of the city it's like responsible for? Like departmentally. Utilities. Water. Okay, so we as citizens are recipients of services from the city. Those services may not always be equitable. So from an equity framework, as a recipient of services, what are some areas as citizens we should be cognizant of? Again, the same question, what are some key pillars that citizens need to see, hear, believe, feel through an equity framework? Hard question, but put your citizen hat on. And if you were a citizen who saw an infographic around this equity framework and you glanced at it, what would you want on there?
Oh, God.
I know I'm asking hard questions, but this is kind of.
All right. Well, you know what? Yeah. You know what? I want the internet to be a utility. Can you make that happen for me, Manoj?
I cannot.
So, yeah, because I mean, I'm coming from the place where, we all know that access to the internet isn't equal, right? So, like finding ways to mitigate that
Mhm.
is access to goods and services,
Mhm.
access to, I think the city, the local community can, and the governmental system can, I hope I'm answering your question, but can, without changing, the laws of the internet or physics, can work to, or the current laws of the internet and the forever laws of physics, can really work to mitigate some of those actual, more, if to a greater extent than we do now.
Mhm.
And to me, that would, is part of that.
Yeah.
Like, I hope you think I'm answering your question. In my mind, I am.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, I'm not fishing for anything other than your honest thoughts, so I think that's really good. Cool. Aaron, any thoughts or builds?
This is a hard one. I guess like what I'm kind of hearing from Linda is, just to broaden it a little bit, is like, are the services actually meeting the needs of the people, of the citizens? And that's, I think obviously a really good thing to be considering. It's really important. Other like core pillars, I mean, I guess I'm not like thinking of anything in particular besides the kind of obvious, like access, equity, inclusion, accessibility, like, which is basically access, but
Like, so
and
for
maybe
example,
like, yeah, go ahead, Linda.
like for example, I think what you're stressing for is, how do we actualize that? We talk about it. Lots of good people are talking about it, but how do we actualize it, right? So, like, support systems for LGBTQ, or support systems for and actual, like, language in a job situation or in a departmental situation level that actually allows, I don't know, I don't even want to use those words. I want to say that includes a person's religion as part of their work-life balance.
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
can language that we already use and actually around inclusivity, and actually make it happen by grounding it out in actual things an employer can do to, like the city can do, for example, right? In any one of its departments, make allowances for religious preferences and needs. So are we still on track for your question?
Well, let me reframe it.
What is-
Access is so obviously a key theme here. So what does access mean to you within the context of the services that the city provides?
Okay. Effective internet, even as far as China had access to technology when if you're homeless and struggling to not be.
Mhm.
Actual things that help us get, like, access to information. One of the biggest problems in China had communicating with the homeless. Not everybody has a flipping computer or a smartphone, and even if they did, connectivity is ridiculous. But at this point, it's like paper communication just doesn't really happen anymore.
Right.
You pick up these lists of just something this simple. You pick up the lists of food shelters, food banks in town. Every single one you get around town is like actually not even really accurate,
Mhm.
because they put them out 6 months ago.
Right.
I mean, so like a more robust and effective, more robust and effective methods of, like, from the city communicating with people who can't necessarily interact with the city the same way that most of us can.
Mm.
Is that concrete?
Yep.
Or like sort of?
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely covers like the information piece of leveling the playing field around information dissemination and understanding. From a timeliness perspective, from a channel perspective, we just assume people are always on the internet, and not everybody is.
You'd be
Sorry, Rick.
amazed when people don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
Mm.
I appreciate that. And to your point, outdated information, it's all really good. And
Just simple. I went over to St. Vincent's to get food because I had to. And a gentleman walked in and said, can I print something here? Right? I really need to get this document printed, this thing printed so I can blah, blah, blah. And the ladies at the front desk did not know where to send them. So they went searching, right? And I'm happened to be standing there. I said, you need to walk down 8 blocks and go to the navigation center. That's at over by Mart.
Mhm.
That they will help you through. They will help you do anything you need, right? And I'm standing there thinking, wow, if I wouldn't have been there, those ladies would have had to say, well, no, we really can't help you, and didn't know where to send them. So they'd been right back out the door, and who knows how long you took to walk there, because Duke probably doesn't have a phone. So, it's that. I mean, paper dissemination of materials, making sure that the shelters have the information about the navigation should be on the wall. Lots of walls.
Yeah.
So, that kind of thing. They don't have it, they can't find, they don't have the information, who knows, they don't know it's available. Different ways, more robust, more creative ways of getting to people who need this information the most.
Yeah, thank you for bringing us back to that. I take that for granted. My day to day, oh, everyone's online, just get it online.
And not so much.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Well, and even Linda, to your point about the example that you gave earlier regarding your a resident at your building, when we do post things in paper online, right? What does that mean for somebody, like you said, who may not be able to be reading or potentially need something in a different language? So access should also include those fundamental other considerations as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that's all really important. The other thing that this is like bringing to mind for me in terms of access is like support if you're having problems or if you can't get the information, like who do you reach out to? And I know that there are ways, but I think a really sticky problem is like especially people who are of like non-dominant groups or who deal with negative stereotypes around their identity. It can be an extra challenge to actually reach out and feel like you're going to be listened to and heard and helped, rather than being assumed that you're an angry Black person or you're a problem in some way. Or I think that's a hard one in that, like, I don't know exactly how that is addressed, since there's not, I don't know how you would like flag, like, this is not something that we're doing. We do want questions from specifically groups that don't feel like they can receive support from local government or from service providers, but that does seem like a real access problem to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Other thoughts, builds. My brain is getting full, to be honest. So we spent about an hour talking about this so far. I'd love to just kind of open it up for any free. I don't have a specific question, but I want to open up sort of for a free form, and sort of our final step together.
Lisa, do we have anyone on just for public comment?
Aaron, Linda, any final thoughts? Maybe I didn't ask the right questions and there's something that you'd like to share to help with the development of this. A question you have, I may not have the answer, but we can pose the question and go hunting for the answer.
Oh, I think I might need some more time on it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind in the preliminary, in the next reiteration to kind of like, I keep going back to my idea of a pie. Trying to figure out what are the categories, what are the sections involved in this pie. Maybe we should resort to like, you know, a few creative not data graphs, but conceptual
Mhm.
diagrams. A storyboard, sort of, not a storyboard, but do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Just free thinking, that might be a way to try to get, sometimes the lists get, you know, like halfway through it, you're like, your brain's fried. I'm like, nope, no more room. So putting it sometimes in, like even think flow chart, like how would this like equity framework? Let's flip it. How if we're gonna write this thing, how are there ways we can imagine of this equity framework that we're gonna write actually preventing like non-inclusion? Am I making sense?
Yeah, I mean, my short answer to that is like changing. It's a lens for which it helps people think differently and expands their thinking. That's the short answer.
If we could put that in a picture somehow, we might be able to drive it home better than in words.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like that. I like that idea. And if there is more of an illustrative way for us to convey some of these ideas, I totally love that. And I could even envision once we do have some content written on paper, we could have a designer or someone really bring it to life for us in a more visual way. And even if, as you're brainstorming, Linda, and putting some thought behind this, even if you just want to draw it in a simple sketch, that would be helpful, you know, because it is
I'll try to give it a shot.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to convey ideas verbally or in written language. So sometimes if you draw it, like that would be great. I love that.
I'm gonna give it some thought.
Cool.
You guys too. Well,
Yeah.
let's do some doodles.
That sounds great.
We'll doodle our way to freedom.
There you go. Well, like I said to start the meeting, I'd love to take all of this, codify it in hopefully a somewhat meaningful way, add my own layer of thinking as I mostly pose the questions today, as opposed to answer any of them, and then distribute it to the subcommittee for thoughts, builds, throw it in the trash, like whatever kind of thing we need to do. If that's an okay next step, if you can give me a little bit of time, I am happy to undertake that, if that's okay.
Wow, I think that's awesome and really appreciate it.
Cool. Yeah, again, you guys provided a ton of great input, so I'm not going to sort of answer it sort of thing, but I will definitely put language around everything that's, as much as I can, put language around what's been communicated today in hopefully a somewhat coherent manner.
Thank you.
So yeah, so stay tuned. Really appreciate you all. Just thank you for showing up. Thank you for being brave in the beginning and being real. And thanks for answering really hard questions. I knew I came today and didn't give you a chance to prepare. But I appreciate you all stepping up your game. That was awesome.
We appreciate you too, Minaj.
Yeah.
For real.
Yeah. Just one quick question. If, you know, as we're marinating in what we've been talking about today, if we do have thoughts, what's the, I guess this is really for Cassandra or Ian, like what's the correct way for us to pass those on? Can we send them to Manoj directly, or do we need to send them to Cassandra if we have additional thoughts on this stuff?
Thank you for such a thoughtful question, Erin. I would say just for ease, send it to me and then I can share it out with Manoj if that works. Is that
Yes.
Ian shakes his head and says yes. So that'll be That'll be
Great.
our preferred method of communication.
Yeah,
Maybe a pigeon carrier next time or something.
I will take any late night inspirations, even if it's just a line, like whatever. I'll take anything and everything. So if you have stuff, please send it my way. Like interesting article you read, like any sort of things to get the wheels turning would be great.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you for facilitating Manoj, and thanks everyone for bearing with me as I jumped back and forth between this and work. So I appreciate it.
Thanks for making space for this in the middle of the day. I appreciate it.
Yeah, important.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Good to see
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, Linda. Thank
Hey,
you.
Cassandra. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Megan and Ian. I think I got it.